Hi, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Wallet Max Planet Positive podcast. I'm Bhuva Shakti, based in New York, and the founder of Wallet Max. We are a global community of startups, investors, and executives focused on increasing sustainable funding access, especially in climate tech, fintech, deep tech, and AI sectors. We interview one impact investor every month for our podcast. We invite them to share their background, but more importantly, what differentiates them from the crowd. How do they prioritize impact along with profits and planet? We deep dive into their personal and professional journeys and their mission to uplift. Today, we are speaking with Sabrina, the Associate Director of Investments at Spring Point Partners, an independent investment firm that strategically allocates capital to maximize long term financial performance. She works closely with fund managers and direct investments to drive value creation in private markets. Prior to Spring Point, Sabrina played a key role in shaping Plan International's investment strategy, where she developed innovative financial vehicles to support business growth in emerging markets and led a pilot initiative in Nairobi, Kenya, to improve capital access and scalability for enterprises. She holds an MBA from the University of Oxford and a BS from Oklahoma State University. Let me now hand over to Sabrina and invite her to say a few words about her background and career path. Over to you, Sabrina.
Great. Thank you, Bhuva. Really excited to connect with you today and really excited to dive into this conversation. So I think that was a perfect overview. Just for some context, I came into this work through a little bit of an atypical background. So started off my career as an educator doing Teach for America in Oklahoma because I was really passionate around economic justice and economic opportunity, and still firmly believe education is one of the core foundational pathways to get folks to opportunities for economic mobility as well as wealth building within their community. After doing that work, though, for a while, just really learned the necessary skill sets around the importance of finance and financial investments and the pathway that we can take as
Mhm.
investment professionals to help empower communities. So I've been taking that work forward ever since, and really excited to dive in today about how we do that here at Spring Point.
Thank you, Sabrina. Asymmetrical path is what I've heard from almost all the investors I've spoken with. And that brings a wide variety of perspective instead of just focused on the investment mechanics itself, right? So, what's your unique secret sauce? What was the pivotal moment in your life that has led you here?
I feel like so many, and it's hard. I've been reflecting on this a lot recently as we're starting to, get into annual planning for 2026 about why I'm so passionate around this work. And I do think a big part of it was I grew up in Oklahoma. For those who aren't really familiar with the state, it's a lower income state, and grew up in was just like amazing, wonderful community and people around me. And when I went to Oklahoma State for undergrad and just really started to explore the state more and realized the lack of opportunity that was being afforded to many of the other community members that lived in the state, and just how finance could be a potential tool for that. My mom is a banker. She's always worked in banking, and as a kid, I was like, "Oh my gosh, that sounds so boring." But she always used to say, "This is how you can help people make their dreams come true." And I was starting to think through. I think, we see money can have a lot of negative consequences, but if it's in the
Mhm.
hands of the right people who are coming at it with a problem-solving perspective, it can do a lot of good. So I think just kind of interrogating that in my young adult life as I kind of started to grow up in my career. And I was a STEM undergrad, so I majored in biochemistry and physiology, and just like loved math. And I think anytime where you can use, quantitative structures to try to help solve real world problems is just like always a joy as like somebody who enjoys a puzzle. So I think there's just like a lot of different things, both personally and professionally, that led me to this path. And it's been really fantastic journey so far.
And why did you decide to do your MBA in Oxford?
Yeah, I absolutely, so many reasons. But as I was interviewing for business school, growing up in the middle of the country in the States, I'd always wanted to live abroad and wanted to spend significant time there. And I think, and especially in US capital markets, we can be really insular. And as somebody who is wanting
Mhm.
to explore, I knew I wanted to work in impact finance after the MBA. wanted to make sure I was getting a global perspective and really understanding the needs of the majority of people who inhabit this planet. And Oxford
Yeah.
had one of the most diverse programs. So we had people from 64 countries in my program that were represented. It was phenomenal. I'd have lunch with people from all over the country, different continents, and just hearing their perspectives and what brought them to this program. All of our lives converging at this one moment together was just invaluable. And they also had the type of faculty that I was really looking for. So I was really specifically looking for a program that had a very intensive impact investing network and talent that could really help me fine tune my skill sets as I was looking to enter this next stage of my career. And that all kind of all happened when I went to interview there.
Yeah, bringing diverse perspectives from real people from real other continent experiences is really important to do this work, because impact can take many shapes and forms, but what do you understand from the people on the ground is really more important.
Yeah,
Now, why
definitely.
do you focus on community driven justice at Spring Point Partners? Where do you see opportunities and challenges specific to social impact investments, both in the US and rest of the world?
Yeah. So Spring Point Partners, to give a little bit of context to us as an organization, so we're a Philadelphia-based investment firm. We do a myriad of strategies. So our founding team really set us up to be as flexible as possible. So we're set up as an LLC, and that allows us to deploy very different types of capital depending on what the needs are of that opportunity. So we have very robust grants investments as well as direct capital or direct equity or debt vehicles. We also do some more innovative products and some recoverable grants. So we can kind of run the gamut. In Spring Point Partners, we're a social justice organization. So we have a couple of key areas that are more grant focused, like education and creating a positive culture and environment for young adults, as well as a few others. Our investment practice really focuses around economic justice because we see it as a core opportunity to create social justice. So, and I firmly believe that. I think that's been my lived experience, having worked in education and also just growing up in Oklahoma around, people have a lot more autonomy and power when they can make their own financial decisions and can take risks. And I think we're seeing, more disproportionately that in the States, at least, we're seeing a K-shaped economy where where the majority of people have less spending power than they've had in the past in the
Yeah.
US. So I think this is like a really pivotal moment for us as a country and our identity of like how we want to create a healthy and thriving democracy and economy. And I think capital is really critical for that. And obviously Spring Point does as well. At Spring Point, we really we're a US focused organization. So Spring Point, obviously we have perspectives on a lot of the developments that are happening internationally, but I think, I really developed a lot of those thoughts and opinions while I was working at Plan. And it was really amazing to just see people, like in the work in Kenya, the majority of my team was based in Kenya, and just hearing the amazing solutions that were being developed by local entrepreneurs, and just trying to make
Yeah.
sure that we could give them capital to back these solutions that were made by people who had proximate lived experience to the problems they were hoping to solve was just such a gift.
Yeah, there's a whole gamut of a lot of fintech and AI solutions coming out of Africa as a whole. And I've seen it quite a lot
Yeah.
also. One quick thing before we move on to the next topic is some investors differentiate financial inclusion and economic justice as two different things. What is your view on that? Are they both different, same, or part of a strategy?
Um, I don't know if I have a super strong opinion on them being separate. I think there's like obviously, organizations have reasons why I think they have very clear mandates around specific language. So I think those can be really specific to what the needs are of the investing organization. I think for me, I think there's significant overlap. I see them as very synonymous in a lot of ways, but obviously not fully. But I don't feel like getting into the weeds between those two like terms is necessarily something I spend like a whole lot of time reflecting on. I think both are really critical and needed, and in a lot of ways can be viewed almost. I hear people almost using them interchangeably. So I think there's just a little bit of confusion in the market about like if there actually is any differentiation there. But
Yeah, totally agreed. As long as you are able to get inclusion access in terms of financial power to most people, the 99%, then the terms do not matter.
yeah,
I agree. And in the current political landscape between US and globally also, so it was a little bit in the US, quite a lot this year, almost globally as well. A lot of big corporations and private investors are shifting priorities. Now, based on your prior experience in emerging markets and within the economic justice sector, why is investing in mission aligned projects still important for the long term in today's economy at Springpoint Partners? Do your stakeholders talk about balancing profits and return on investment? How do you manage that?
Yeah, we spend a lot of time talking about this. So, and,
Yeah,
I think in general, investments have impact no matter what. So I think this is kind of when I start these conversations with a lot of folks who maybe are either impact investing curious or impact investing skeptical or wherever we're at on the spectrum. I think it's just like acknowledging that, anytime you're deploying capital, you're making a vote for the new future that you want to see. And I think there's a lot of power in that. And I think there's a lot of maybe people not recognizing how much control we potentially have in that space and how much accountability we should have as an investor, whether you have an impact mandate or not, on holding yourself accountable to like what are the potential unintended consequences of this investment, what are the like potential excitements, and just really digging into that conversation and figuring out ways to hold yourselves accountable to the outcomes you want to see outside of, just things that you're going to see on, the financial side. That being said, though, financial, being able to like run a financial model and have like a financially viable organization is really critical. So I do think
yeah,
there's like health, and that's what I really love about impact investing is I hope it balances some of the more positive things about pure play financial investment or capitalist systems of, being able to like create viable businesses that can sustain and last for a really long time, while also like holding ourselves accountable to like businesses should do more than just, make the most profit they can for shareholders. There's other stakeholders around the table that should also get benefits from these businesses, whether that's people or the planet. And how do we kind of shift these systems that we have all inherited and make them less extractive at a whole? And how can we create and accrue value for the most diverse groups of stakeholders we can at one time? So I think that's kind of where I approach this. I think in terms of like pure play financial returns and balancing financial returns versus impact, I think it really depends on the deal and what your investment thesis is and what you're investing in. So for instance, at Springpoint Partners, we do a lot of emerging manager investing where we're investing in venture. So I spend a lot of my time looking at AI deals. And, for our emerging managers, my goal there is to back the best and brightest investors in their chosen thesis. And they need to be a top performing fund. Currently the metric in those funds is that they are a top decile fund. They return, X amount of LP capital. And I need that to prove out the impact that people with diverse perspectives can and lead successful firms and outperform their peers. And I will say our managers are crushing it. So we've got some really fantastic managers in that portfolio that I'm just in awe of the ability they have to, really look at the complexity of new problems and find really phenomenal founders that can solve those issues. But then, we also do more innovative financial products where like maybe this is a new fund structure that we haven't seen in the States and we're willing to back that. And when we're pricing that or thinking about the return profile, we kind of look at aggregate of, what are impact goals for the whole portfolio and what are the return goals for the whole portfolio? And how do we leverage some of these things that we're hoping will be, above market or on market versus some of these things that are a little bit more risky?
yeah, I totally agree. Diversity drives innovation, and definitely being inclusive is not only good for the bottom line, but for a broader impact as well. So I remember I was at Columbia Business School. I was also studying an MBA there long back when the Business Roundtable announced, okay, we owe to the stakeholders broadly in addition to our direct shareholders. And that was a whole controversy even at that time where shareholders versus stakeholders, how do you differentiate? But then stakeholders cannot be different, right? Because they are our communities where we run our business, our employees, our customers. So if we don't take care of them, then how do we plan to return profits to our shareholders? So there are two sides of that discussion still happening. I see that. But in your current and past roles as an investor, have you faced challenges specifically to this constantly changing US regulations? Because also you focus heavily in the US market. Because on a daily basis, there are different views of what is classified as what.
Yeah, definitely. I think both, especially when I was working before coming to Springpoint, operating in a lot of different geographies at the same time, and looking at different financial tools in those different locations and countries. regulation and policy really matter. I think, just for instance, like trying to set up, one thing here and then the next country over, like we actually can't deploy X for whatever reasons. It's not viable. So
Mhm.
there definitely is this really interesting relationship between, the business side of economy as well as the political side. I think in the US, we have a pretty rapidly evolving and changing political landscape right now, which I think is very different than what we've experienced in the past. And I think we're just trying to make sure that we stay abreast of, the specific changes and how that could impact our portfolio. We did a lot of scenario planning and just trying to make sure that we're not getting caught off guard in a time where there's just a lot of shifts and changes that are being made, and trying to create as much stability as we can for our investees, so that they, that we can be a solid partner for them and help them to adapt and pivot as they need to with their strategies.
Yeah, with a lot of not only just US political landscape, but geopolitically, there are so many challenges. It's really difficult to understand on a daily basis how do we change our investment patterns. But specific to privacy, security, and accessibility, which is something not many people talk about, how do you include these in your investment decisions? So these are kind of very common across all types of investments, but some of the investors consider it as an outlier.
I'm not sure if I fully understand the question. Do you mind asking again?
Yeah, so in terms of privacy, it's user consent, user data, sensitive data
Mm.
sharing, getting consent from the user before you use it for your business profit. Security, again, in terms of cybersecurity, there was a lot of challenges earlier. Now, with AI and other easily hackable issues, how do you balance that? Accessibility is more like the physical disability or even visually impaired, or people have neurological disorders and they need your software or your product or service to function differently. Sometimes some of this privacy, security, and accessibility considerations are more product or service or founder related. Is this something you have holistically in your investment decision at the portfolio level?
Yeah, perfect. Thank you so much for clarifying. So in terms of, cybersecurity and, those types of concerns, we mostly invest at the fund level. So we do
Mhm.
require our funds to have cybersecurity policies and like ways that they think about how they underwrite, user data sensitivity, especially for our healthcare funds. That's like a major concern. So we dig into that a lot in diligence to make sure that we are backing investors that we think are actually taking these things seriously and know how to interrogate a founder. I think a lot of times too, founders are really well intentioned when they develop technology, but then, through either, whatever type of exit they go through, sometimes that technology can be used in ways that that founder probably didn't even intend. So we also do a lot of discussions around how to talk through, responsible exits with fund managers as well as with
Mhm.
founders, and really back fund managers that we think have a good, strong understanding of governance and how to help support founders through journeys where they might have their values be tested. So those are some of our mitigants. I think anytime in these spaces, there's always risks, and like how do you mitigate them the best you can. So I think for us, we're really looking at, do they have a quality policy? Have we dug in enough during our diligence process to make sure we feel confident that our managers like know how to access these things? And then also like, do they have strong governance skill sets in order to help founders? And then in terms of accessibility, I think this is where less of like a formal, check mark box on things, but like I think this is where technology is really exciting right now. I think we're seeing a lot of I've seen actually a few funds that are focused specifically, and we're seeing a lot of really cool companies that are coming out with ways that they can support people with diverse needs, which is really exciting. The ways that technologies can be used to create better opportunity and better access, I think we've just never seen this in our history, and I think it's just going to continue to grow more
Yeah.
rapidly. So I'm really excited about it.
And is AI going to play a part in it? What is your thought process with the AI hype right now?
Yeah, it's I definitely a lot of hype. I think it will. I don't know. I feel like on AI, I fluctuate daily of like existential dread and concern versus like, oh my gosh, this is so exciting, right? So there's like this like mix, like those two things, and I feel like I whiplash between the two.
Yeah.
I think AI is, in terms of a lot of benefits for people, like for instance, like being able to rapidly adapt technology. There's just so many use cases on things that it can do really well. and really exciting. I think like my two biggest concerns with AI are this is the quickest probably we'll see a technological revolution in our time. And, in the past, when we've had major industrial advancement, it's taken longer. And even those caused quite a bit of displacement and harm in communities. So just like, how are we being thoughtful about trying to mitigate that as much as possible. And then also the real conversation around the environmental impacts. I think that
Yeah,
those are um, things that we're trying to quantify and measure that are already pretty alarming, and we don't really even fully grasp like the amount of water usage, the amount of energy need. A lot of the servers are being built adjacent to low income communities, and those could have potential health impacts. So there's like a lot of real considerations when looking at this space, but I don't foresee AI going away. I also, I think it's fascinating to just see how much hype there is around it. And like, I think we're still trying to figure out like what is actual hype versus like what is like the sustainable long-term changes that are going to be made to, future markets. And it's definitely impacting and will impact today. To what extent will these shifts happen? We don't know yet.
yeah, and especially also in addition to the energy and economy impact, environmental impact, we also see some of the electric bills, utility bills are increasing for low income families because data center is nearby, right? So because of the energy shortage and things of that sort. So it's kind of holistically impacting a lot of things, but there is also a lot of advantage in solving medical challenges, environmental challenges, again, people's problems using AI as a technology. Trying to balance that is the key at this moment. So, in terms of success, how has it been for you? Are you able to share some case studies, examples of companies you have invested personally and or from Spring Point partners?
Um, yeah, so I think, some of the things that we're really excited about are how, for AI specifically, I think things that get us excited are opportunities that can create like a more even playing field. So for instance, like one of our underlying portfolio companies is looking at ways to systemize better training opportunities for people who have gone to trade schools in the past. That
Mhm.
actually lowers the cost of enrollment for users, which is really exciting. And what I think is like fascinating about that company in particular is, trades are things that can't be replaced by AI. So like, there's like, we need electricians, we need plumbers. These are great, amazing, wonderful careers that can have really positive salaries associated with them. But the apprenticeship models can be really time consuming and can be really costly. So ways that you can actually help to create better training models for folks that lower that timeline and also cost is really exciting. Yeah, so I think like that's the first example that comes to mind of like a really exciting way I think AI is like actually helping and empowering workforce development.
Yeah, and is there a mistake you want to talk about? How did you navigate? Are there any valuable lessons in your investment journey, professional journey?
Um, I think so many lessons. I really appreciate Spring Point is a learning based organization. So we actually have like a whole learning framework about how every time we're deploying capital, like what are the lessons we have to bring back to the organization. And I really love that ethos.
Mhm.
I think for us, we started doing emerging manager investing in 2020. So we're about 5 years, 6 years into the portfolio now, and just have a million lessons learned. And I would say, just in general, as new organizations are either shifting into an impact mandate or we're seeing a lot of new family offices. It's just like, how do you embed that muscle and that ethos to create self-reflection on deals when it's so easy to just like, okay, we've deployed this and move on to the next one. So not to but get too meta on it, but I almost think like my biggest learning is that like learning is critical as an investment professional. We think of this as like traditional professional development opportunities, going to X, but a lot of it really is just taking the time down to reflect on what are the lessons learned from this investment and how do I incorporate them to make myself a stronger investment professional and to move the sector forward.
And do you also collaborate with other investors in your industry, geography, or vertical about some of the lessons that you learn? Do you share learnings? How do you collaborate with other investors outside of Spring Point in your area of work?
Yeah, we collaborate a lot and with really diverse sets of LPs and investors, which is also really exciting. I think that what's the proverb where, if you want to go fast, go alone, but if you want to, actually like create change, like you have to do it in community. And I think that's really important. And, especially like I don't expect anybody that I'm collaborating with to have all the answers, but hopefully together as a community of investors who have similar values or goals that we can hopefully create a more cohesive ecosystem. So some of the specific ways that we collaborate, we go to a lot of conferences and events. We're always happy to share out learnings that we can at panels or, share materials with other investors. Like we do quite a bit of collaboration on, screening frameworks and those types of things, as well as being in community as a practice. We're in a couple of different groups and organizations and, investment groups, membership organizations where we can go and learn from other industry professionals. And then we have I spend a lot of time with our investees. We don't want to be an LP that just like cuts you a check and then leaves. Like one, I want to be here to support you and be, have a strong relationship with you, but I learned so much from our investees as well. And that those touch points and those conversations are some of the most invaluable for my career. And I really admire the people that we've deployed capital into. I think they're just some of the best and brightest in the business. So I really love collaborating with them as well.
Yeah, collaboration versus competition is key for growth and scale, right? In terms of whatever solution you're building. So, someone who's again in a career path like yourself, so you have an atypical career entry into the investing role. If someone is not part of the insiders club, they're not part of the traditional network, how can they get into venture capital or institutional funding as an investor, a GP or a LP like yourself? What advice or resources can you share?
Yeah, it's it is challenging. Like I don't want to like sugarcoat it for folks. Like if this is a an opportunity you want to explore, like it does take some time and thoughtfulness and a lot of conversations. For me, I went down the graduate school path. So I did an MBA program. Before that, I was doing some consulting with some ed tech startups and kind of like building that muscle before starting that degree. But that was really pivotal for me, was doing that program, learning a ton, getting that endorsement and actually getting the skill sets, and then had an internship through that. I do think there are a lot of opportunities for folks that have maybe, different, there's always really interesting fellowship programs. Like there's all sorts of things. I would just say, hustling, listening to things like this, finding opportunities, you can find a ton of resources online. But if I had to like boil it down to like two pieces of advice, I would say like figure out a way to invest in yourself, whether that's, going back to school or, doing even like an online, there's a ton of programs now. A lot of universities have online modules that are free to learn about the space and learn about the players and kind of map out who are some of the organizations that you find most intriguing. And then use that to try to have some conversations with people. I knew that I wasn't going to have a resume that was going to pop out of a stack of like 80, like when I was first starting off in this space about 10 years ago. Like I really needed to have one-to-one conversations with folks about my motivations, my skill sets. So really just kind of like pounding the theoretical pavement, right? Which is, I guess now is LinkedIn. But really
Yeah.
like finding ways to like network and go to ecosystem building events. There's a lot of like free access opportunities out there for folks if they want to get into that. And then I say the last piece of advice is, I think when people think of investments, they think of check writers and like people who are on the like
Yeah.
actual deal team. There are so many amazing opportunities within organizations that are investing capital that don't require you to actually be an investment professional. There's investment relations roles, there's operations, there's like so much that goes into actually getting checks out the door. That can be an easier way to pivot into the space, and that actually might be a better fit for you. So you get to have all the great, amazing potential impact and be part of that team, and it might be a little bit of an easier landing.
Yeah, totally agreed. There could be multiple ways, and it need not be always the investing role to start with, right? And you also focus a lot on emerging managers. These days, the younger generation, people coming out of school or in early career, they have some challenges with networking, finding the right kind of networking events, talking to the right type of investors without spending a lot of time trying to search for it or attend the wrong events so they don't get to talk to you, right? So what would you advise in terms of networking for emerging managers and also early career students or leaders who want to get into venture capital investing or non-investing roles?
Yeah, I think very one commonality is, if there are in-person opportunities, like that's great. Like I think that makes a big difference. I can tackle the emerging manager one first, and then happy to talk through, younger, new entrants to the space. Maybe they're not young, but new entrants to investment space. So for emerging
Yeah.
managers, I would just say, really having a clear understanding of different types of LP profiles is really important. So, if you're launching a fund one venture firm, realistically, you're not going to be having conversations that will convert to investment capital with a pension, right? Like there maybe some, but for the most part, you're probably looking more at like ultra high net worth individuals, family offices, and a few of these other kind of spaces that have like very specific emerging manager mandates,
Hmm.
and have the risk tolerant capital to invest in kind of an unproven firm. So I think some of the kind of frustrations I see from a lot of emerging managers is they're not talking to the right profile of LP at the
Yeah.
right time in their firm building journey. So just like taking some time to like map that out. Don't not talk to the pensions. Like if you get an opportunity to talk to some of these really big endowments or things like that, like go talk to them, but just know that you're like laying the groundwork for something that will probably convert in 5 to 6 years, not necessarily within the like next 6 months to a year. So I'd say that's kind of like my biggest piece of advice at large. And then, I think the other thing I would say is just being really conscious of, if you have 2 minutes at a cocktail party, like what are the things you want to highlight about your firm that make it really stand out and showcase you as a human? Because, when we're investing in emerging manager, yes, your thesis matters, your portfolio construction matters, the size of your fund matter, but I'm really trying to see if I trust your judgment. Like, do I, from
Hmm.
human to human, do I think you are a sound investor? Do I think you can underwrite critically and thoughtfully in a way that's values aligned with our organization? So like, how are ways that you can get those nodes to come out and get opportunities for me to get to know you as a person versus, I think people really lead with the like high level parts of their deck. Like if I'm intrigued, like I will dig into those things, but just, kind of flipping that script a little bit. For people who are interested in, especially, for undergrads or for, people who are in their MBA or, people who are maybe further along in their career but are looking for a career pivot. One, just want to say I really empathize. Like I think like it's a really hard. Networking is exhausting, especially when it's new. And the number of times like when I was first starting out in the space and I'd walk into rooms and I didn't know a soul, and you're like, okay, I just have to like cold go up to this group of people and introduce myself. It's really intimidating, and I just like want to like, yes, you are seen. But in terms of like
Yeah.
strategies and things, I think like going to, if you're at a university, if you're actively in school, whether it's undergrad or graduate school, go to the things, like go to the events. They are really important. I speak on panels at universities pretty frequently. I'm really passionate about, getting the next generation of investment professionals into this space, whether impact or, non-impact financial institutions. I just think it's really important. And I think that's one of the other side effects of AI is a lot of this entry level work is getting eaten up.
Yeah.
So how do we create pipelines? So I'd say like go to the events, meet people, do the things, and also like don't be afraid to try to follow up on LinkedIn. I actually do respond to those. Not if it's just like an invite with no message. If I don't have any context, I might not because I don't know you. But like if you write in like, hey, student at X, would love to chat with you. Like I usually do take those calls. So don't be afraid to do those things. And then I would just like as many times as you can to hop on conversations with folks, and just people from my experience when I was doing my MBA, people are happy to hop on a 30-minute call and talk about themselves. And like, so just like setting
Yeah.
up those networking calls of like, I just want to learn about your journey. You get so much information. And, I think a lot of times people think of impact investing or investment work as kind of like a one size fits all. And actually there's a million nuances within, type of organization, type of capital deployed. There's just so many different, the impact sector, there's so many nuances that will impact like what your career or your day-to-day could look like. So the more listening you can do, the better.
Yeah, don't be afraid of networking. All of us have been there, right? And also meet the right people, like you mentioned. Maybe at the early stage of your fund or career, you need to talk to different set of people, but then keep the connection warm because you could potentially talk to different set of people in the later stage of the fund or the career, right? So don't try to be transactional is what I've always heard from a lot of investors as well. In your journey, are there any communities or mentors you relied on while you're transitioning into being an investor?
Oh, so many. And I think that's part of why I'm so passionate around, mentorship or creating opportunities is I am the direct, you know, recipient of so many wonderful, thoughtful people pouring into me as a person in my career that I just have so much gratitude, and it was life-changing for me. And, I think especially as, a woman, like that mentorship and that like confidence was really important for me. So
Yes.
just, yeah, too many to count. I think like in terms of like specific networks, I am an active alumni for Said Business School at University of Oxford. So that one was a very impactful experience for me. So I do quite a bit of mentoring and still engage in mentorship conversations with him. I talk to my careers advisor, Dan Kieran, like probably once a quarter. Like he's such a wonderful human. And he was so impactful. He helped me get my first internship and my first job, which was life-changing for me. And then, I had a lot of mentors during business school, like one of my professors, Ani Patton Power, an entrepreneur in residence, Tara Sabri Collier. And then my current manager at Spring Point, Margot Kane, just like some of the most talented, thoughtful investment professionals in this space. And I'm so happy to have benefited from them. And then some other, networks that we're part of. We work quite a bit with other ecosystem builders in the space. We're members as an organization of things like Mission Investors Exchange and the Impact and a few others. So yeah, I think, all those types of organizations are really critical to help you build out your network with smart, thoughtful folks, but also to actually engage in direct panel conversations where you can learn from others.
Thanks for also giving back to the community in terms of mentoring others and the next generation, because I also think it's not about us getting something from our mentors, but when you mentor someone else, I feel like we learn something. It's more like reverse mentorship, or even from the younger generation, intergenerational mentorship. So I learn a lot from younger people also, quite a lot every day. So you mentor someone, you get something in return, whether or not you are getting a mentor back, right? So really thankful for that. And then in terms of emerging trends, I wanted to quickly check in. Are there anything that you are excited about now that we are at the start of the year in 2026? Anything that you're bullish, trying to follow up?
Yeah. I think what we're trying to figure out, we're at a fun point in our strategy where we're hopefully doing a lot of reflection and learning and fine tuning. So really excited to build out our impact measurement and management practices alongside some of these things. I think we obviously have had data we've tracked, but I think we're really investing in that. So as a trend, I think that's really exciting. And I think like more broadly outside of our organization, there's been a lot of development in that space, which is really cool. We can, to be impact investors, we do need to have the data to like showcase like what impact we're
Yeah.
having. So I am really excited about that. In terms of, like more macro level trends, I do think there's a lot of interesting stuff happening around AI and just like trying to I think we're finally at a point where we're starting to see some of this initial, obviously it's still, I don't know if bubble's right, but there's a lot of hype. But I think we're like, as an
Yes.
organization, we're starting to have a better nuanced around like, how do we want to look at this as a, an entity, as AI as like a sector, and like how do we start to think about it kind of being, ubiquitous within all technology, and how do we evaluate that? So I think like I'm excited to have like better understandings of where we feel like we want to see AI like really leaned into versus potentially leaned out. Yeah, I think like those are two of the big things. And then this is like more of a personal trend, but I've just been noticing, or maybe professional as well, but I've just been noticing a lot of people craving more community in a really, really lovely way.
Yeah.
And I'm excited for that energy to go into this year. I think, it's been, I think like the stronger we are together as a group, like the more impact we'll be able to have. So just excited to like continue to collaborate with really smart, thoughtful people.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Since last year, I mean, there was this thought about culture and community during the pandemic. But right after we came out, people kind of went back to where we were before the pandemic. But last year and this year, I'm seeing a lot of culture and community sensitive discussions, events, and even workplace adjustments for not only just the next generation, the current set of folks and communities as well, right? So it's really important that, and even AI, there's a lot of cultural sensitivity to AI algorithms, because you can't just develop a model and deploy it anywhere in the world. You need to be locally sensitive to that country's culture and community as well, right? So regardless of technology or not, culture and community, I've also heard quite a lot. So thanks for sharing that, Sabrina. And without sharing any
What are
confidential or
things you're
sensitive,
excited about? Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but what are things you're excited about?
So, a couple of things I'm excited about is I do a lot of work in the environment space. I'm trying to bring awareness where trying to solve climate change is not a separate entity, rather, it's inbuilt into people's health. For example, better air is less number of diseases, better water, better food is going to impact your health, your family's health, your community's health. So, not trying to keep environmental health as something totally separate versus it's inbuilt into our personal and family and professional well being is one thing I am really excited about. I've been working on it for couple of years now. This year, it seems really important. The second thing is definitely AI, but not as a hype or bubble. Like I said, ethics and culture aspects of AI. You can have any number of technology, but how do you deploy across different communities, being sensitive to their cultures and eliminate bias? And the third most important thing is fintech. We spoke about the financial inclusion versus economic justice. I've been working in that space for about 7, 8 years now. I come from an investment banking sector, so you can understand where I come into the financial inclusion space.
Mhm.
I've been on Wall Street. I've seen the 2008 crisis. I've seen a lot of fundraising in capital markets. But then, same as you, I went back to Columbia Business School to do an MBA to really shift my focus into inclusion and entrepreneurship and environment. So those are like three major trends I've been working on for a couple of years. But this year, there seems to be a real need on the ground where we really need to scale that. Thanks for asking.
Yeah, definitely.
And in terms of investment thesis at Spring Point, I just want to quickly check in. Without sharing any confidential or sensitive data, what are the key elements of your Spring Point's investment thesis? And how do you think you are uniquely positioned compared to other institutional funds? Especially today, there are a lot of social and environmental funds that are coming up both in US and in the rest of the world. So how are you uniquely positioned?
Yeah. So in terms of thesis, our thesis is really focused around economic justice and how we can use our private capital investments to create better economic opportunity and wealth building opportunities for underinvested and underrepresented communities in the states. So we do that both through our emerging manager practice, where we're backing the best and brightest folks who we think have a different thesis and way that they want to operate in their asset class. And then we also have our community wealth building side, where we invest in things that are looking at, shared ownership economies. So things like ESOPs or EOTs, as well as more Main
Mhm.
Street style businesses. So we're really looking at different ways that we can kind of create value for different types of stakeholders. And I think the thing that makes us or makes us uniquely positioned is that we are really set up to be able to deploy different type of vehicles. I think there's a lot of times where you see really well-intentioned organizations that just don't have the flexibility or agility to deploy capital in the way that meets the investees' needs, and that precludes you from either being able to invest in a deal, or maybe you do invest in the deal, but that creates like unfavorable relationship dynamic between the two parties. So I think we're really able
Yeah.
to, for deals that, meet our underwriting process and criteria, we're really able to meet them where they are and provide the type of capital that works best for their organization. Which is amazing. I think when you only have the way I think about our work here at Spring Point is if you only have a hammer, everything has to be a nail. Otherwise you're kind of ineffective, or you just like try to make everything a nail. Whereas we have a hammer, we have a screwdriver, we have a saw, we have all these different modalities that we can play with. And I think that allows us to really deliver on the things that we said that we would do.
Now, that's a great point, especially also when you want to scale funds. Like you invest in emerging managers, let's say fund one is deployed, you're successful. Then how do you scale funds in the sense you may be doing add-ons or a fund two with your emerging managers because they are not emerging anymore, they're trying to scale their fund, right? So how is scaling really effective in local communities when you talk about equitable education, economic justice, and climate action?
Yeah, I think firm building is so important, and being able to do that tactfully, whether you're an investment firm or you're actually a founder with a startup, like being able to scale is like such a challenging problem. So we classify for our emerging manager thesis, we classify funds as emerging when they're kind of either from pilot to fund four. And if our goal is we're willing to do an initial investment into your first fund, and then ideally if we hopefully we're backing you in subsequent funds until we can helpfully create an on-ramp to more institutional capitals. Some of those types of LPs I was talking about earlier that just like really for various different reasons can't and shouldn't be looking at these really high risk investments potentially. So our goal is how do we use our LP dollars to like create that vote of confidence and also give you the track record, and also like hopefully create like a really great economic return for us as well. But then also we have a really robust platform of supports for our fund managers that they can access. So we have consultants on bench and retainer, those types of things where people can just like, hey, actually I need storytelling or fundraising support, or I need, like comms and media support. So I think that's actually like really beneficial because, I think there's this misconception a lot of times, especially with venture capital funds, that these are, venture capital funds. For a lot of these small emerging manager funds that are starting out, they're pretty bootstrap businesses. So anytime you can provide resources for the back office, I think it's really valuable. And it's a great way for us to learn about, the types of managers that we care to back in the future, and just to kind of keep our pulse on like what are the risks that we're underwriting. We learn a lot through those conversations.
Yeah, and if your fund manager is doing well, it's actually good for you and your business. So providing resources to help them scale is just part of the puzzle, I guess.
Yeah, I think it's the cheapest way to invest your investment, really, like really though.
Yeah. Yeah, enabling and empowering your fund managers to do well and scale and thrive is going to positively impact your bottom line. So really helpful with
Yeah.
that. And how does your role specifically support diversity in terms of GPs, LPs, and the founders that they invest in?
Yeah, so we're really, we don't have a specific diversity mandate per se, but we're really looking for people who have a unique problem that they're trying to solve in a diverse perspective and how they're trying to solve it. So I do think that kind of skews us towards folks that maybe have, or sorry, I think my computer is resetting. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Perfect. People who maybe have a different lived experience. We do have a lot of our fund managers are, former founders in Silicon Valley and do X. We also have people who like maybe didn't come from that ecosystem. And so I think when we're really looking at, managers, we're really looking for folks who have a unique thesis and a problem that they're trying to solve. And that allows us to have managers that potentially have, the stereotypical, what we would expect to see, for X background, pretty straightforward track record, but we're also able to look at and evaluate managers who maybe don't have that like cookie cutter background and expertise, who we think have a really unique take on what they're trying to invest in. So I think that allows us to just give diversity of perspective and thought into their chosen sector or ecosystem that they're investing in a way that, maybe some other firms like might not be willing to look at that track record.
Yeah, totally agreed. And you also earlier mentioned about the impact measurement trend that you're trying to build out that framework as one of the emerging trends this year. Are there any KPIs that you prioritize more than others in the industry? Maybe you're getting started or you've been using it, you want to upgrade it.
Yeah, I think it's really just trying for us, and I would love to hear from others on this too. I feel like impact measurement manager. I'm not a data scientist, so we have an amazing director of data internally who's been so helpful. But I think for us, we're always just trying to balance like what is the proper, how much measurement, making sure we're not measuring to measure, right? Like that we're actually this is critical data that creates value for both us and for our investees. And then also, how are we thinking about like what is things that are like within our direct control and like not taking credit for things that like we didn't do. So I think like that's the when we're thinking about KPIs or metrics, it's really around like what's the right amount, what actually creates value for us and allows us to learn and allows our investees to continue to like further their practice. And then also like what we feel good about like measuring and saying we had impact on versus like, this is outside of our control. So I think those are the nodes that we're always trying to think through.
Yeah, and is this something you also share with your emerging managers? Do you have shared KPIs, or is it something they determine by themselves and then you find the commonalities?
So we have specific things we look at the portfolio level that we measure internally, in terms of, like hardcore metrics around, impact or other things. We don't have specific things that we require from our fund managers that like aren't things that we could measure ourselves. Our managers have very different theses, and like that's not, we're not a thematic investor in the sense of like we're investing in people, funds or companies that are looking at carbon sequestration or things like that. So there isn't like a roll up of a specific metric like that we can look at, but there are some certain trends that we do roll up. And then for our funds that do classify themselves as impact managers, we do look at their impact reports and we like go through those conversations as we review their financial reporting for the year and see if they're hitting the targets that they promised that they would hit during diligence.
Yeah, and I think that will be very refreshing for your emerging managers as well, because some fund investors may be a little bit more micromanaging, but as long as you have that flexibility between the two of you, then I think both of you are successful. Um, I know it's kind of coming up time and we can discuss quite a lot, but I just wanted to quickly check in if there is anything else you'd like to share with our audience before we wrap up. How can people get in touch with you and Spring Point Partners?
Yeah, I think feel free to reach out to me on either LinkedIn or through our website, or I'm on the road quite a bit, especially at a lot of the emerging manager conferences. So love to see people in person. I'm also going to a couple of different universities for their upcoming panels and things like that. So if you see me out at things, like please come up and say hello. I try to be really, I hope I am a very friendly person. I want to be here to support you. And then in terms of, I don't know if there's anything necessarily that we discussed, but I just wanted to take a second to really thank you for engaging in these conversations and peeling the veil back on impact investing and demystifying the space a little bit. And I just think this has been such an insightful conversation. I've learned a lot from you, and I'm just really excited that you're doing this. So thank you for the time.
Thanks so much, Sabrina. And if you're ever in New York, just please ping me. We should meet up and then see what we can do in person. So definitely, thanks so much for taking time today.
Amazing. Thank you.